Hello again, here we are, exploring who you and I are as consciousness. And in that regard, last week and the week before, I touched on this Hawaiian healing method and problem solving method that I had first been exposed to in Brazil when I went to the spiritual center named after St. Ignatius of Loyola. And I didn't really have a complete appreciation of what was involved until I went and started to investigate more this week. I had made an assumption uh, about what was involved, and it really wasn't that, as I mentioned last week. So, anyway, this week I experimented some with using the I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and thank you as a way of clearing out a channel through which we might receive our inspiration in life. Um, and so I went ahead and I ordered a seminar conducted by Dr. Joe Vitale and Dr. Hew Len in Maui. And as you may know, Dr. Hew Len is Hawaiian. Haleakala Hew Len, that's his actual name, which I'm not even going to try to spell or I barely can pronounce. Anyway, uh, as I've been studying it some this week, I decided to apply it through the week. And then during a situation I had with my wife who has an upcoming surgery. And so she'd gone in to see the doctor, had a consultation. And as we were going home, she was expressing some of her anxiety about it. I was going through in my mind, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. And I was repeating that silently. And as I began to do that, after a couple of minutes, suddenly the radio station, which was not likely to have this kind of music on it, which I'm about to mention, had this music. And the music was from a Hawaiian singer, a late Hawaiian singer, he's no longer with us, named I-Z. And on YouTube, I think it was entitled Is Lives. But this was the radio in the car, and it was on a Sirius XM station. It wasn't likely to be playing this music. So he started singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And, and it was when you saw it on YouTube, he's in Hawaii when he sings this. So I felt chills up my spine, and I felt this energy like I do when I'm doing Reiki. And I was touched by this and almost had some tears in my eyes because it was so immediate, the feeling. So moments later, my wife pulled over and she had to go into a store for a minute. And when she came back out, suddenly she was shocked to say, "Oh my, do you see that license plate? It says Hawaii, the Aloha State." Now, fascinating as that was, the word aloha has often been translated as welcome, and I'm sure it has that element to it. But Dr. Hew Len, Hawaiian, in his heritage, said it actually stands for in the presence of the divine, in the presence of God, or you are in the presence of God, aloha. And so, as we've been talking these last few weeks, all along, consciousness has a greater intelligence than our tiny minds. As I used the analogy before, our mind is like a candle, and that's what Eckhart Tolle suggested, compared to the light of the sun. And so, beginning to live our lives more in the flow of that consciousness that you and I are, that clear, empty consciousness, which is now seeing the image of me on your screen, hearing me speak, and aware of all else that is beyond what our tiny intellect can pick up. And so this goes in line with aligning ourselves with that deeper intelligence. Again, the grass is growing, the trees are blooming. Happy first day of spring, and it's spring. And that's all happening by this greater intelligence. And that greater intelligence is something we can get out of the way and allow to flow through us. And these 4 steps are clearing the way. I love you. I'm sorry. please forgive me, and thank you. And especially as you remember from the presentation before about gratitude, practicing gratitude, just saying the words "I love you." Now, you can look more of this material up in the links I gave you, and anything with Joe Vitale or Dr. Hew Len, spelled Huwlen. And I'm not going to try to reproduce their teachings, but I just want to share what I have experienced this week. So after my wife saw the license plate, that night I shared my experience with a friend in New York. And she said, "Oh, that's wild. I just heard from our mutual friend named Betsy, who lives in Hawaii, in Maui, actually. And I had just that day got the Maui seminar that Dr. Hew Len and Joe Vitale headed up a few years ago. So then the next thing after that, she also said, well, and by the way, our other friend Therese just spent a month in Maui with our other friend Betsy. And in addition to that, I was talking to another friend a couple days later who's been experimenting. He has been experimenting with this, saying the 4 statements himself this week, and he's been finding things happening really fascinating. So he said that it's been amazing. He's had more students signing up for his courses and so forth. And in the meantime, I mentioned about the Maui connection, and he said, "Oh, that's interesting. Our other friends just got back from a celebrating of their second honeymoon in Maui." So it's amazing how things can line up. So I took that as confirmation. So we want to be able to, like I talked about in the basketball game, we want to be able to step back from the mind and to really let consciousness flow through us. Let that intelligence that's in that vastness that's beyond our intellect, and align our intellects with that. And so get out of our heads and clear ourselves. And these statements help to do that. Now, Joe Vitale, and again, you can check out the links I've given you as well as look them up yourself. And I'm not going to reproduce, again, their teachings, but you can try this for yourself. It clears the way for you to flow in your life. So in these weeks to come, I'm going to be going back over next week probably the experience I had 25 years ago that launched, it had to do with light and consciousness, that launched everything that happened since, and some of the magic and some of the miraculous things that have happened. But with just that simple saying, "I love you," and replacing the self-talk. Remember, we have like a commentator in our head all day long, like a sports commentator calling the game of our life. But as I've said before, he's actually influencing the game of our life. It's not just saying what's happening, it's commenting on what you should do, shouldn't do, look at this, look at that, and that constant chatter. And so when we get beyond that and really begin to get into the flow, and using a self-talk that just is a low kind of affirmation or mantra of the "I love you," "I'm sorry," "Please forgive me," "Thank you," or just going with "I love you." And Joe Vitale himself has said what a blissful state it put him in, just to have that kind of running in the back, like a tape in the back of his mind. "I love you, I love you, I love you," while he's saying and doing whatever he needs to do in the course of the day. What produced miracles in his life. And he felt a state of bliss. So also, I love you and I thank you. And to begin to realize that everything is alive with consciousness, that it's the one eternal one life and consciousness, as Eckhart Tolle has suggested, the eternal one life. But as we've talked about, adding the word consciousness, so that on this first day of spring, things are happening. We see things just beginning to burgeon ever so slightly. And you begin to see a whole transformation before our eyes. And that's run by a greater, vast intelligence. And so we're learning to live our lives tuned into that intelligence. And I'll be going over some of these experiences that began 25 years ago that launched it all for me with a white light, and then with a light that came to me a couple of years later on the spring equinox in Guatemala in Tikal, where I was studying with the Mayan shamans, and and then there'll be some others from that, just to give you a sense of this unfolding and the presence of that intelligence, that it's always there for you and me. It's who you and I deeply are, that transparent, ever-present element of our experience, that first person knowing element, that deeper I beyond the little ego I that identifies with this body, mind, and personal history and various experiences. But it's that clear, empty vastness. And this Ho'oponopono is a way of tapping into what they call the zero state, the state, an empty state, which is what we're talking about as consciousness, it pure, empty awareness, that light of awareness in which all this is appearing and in which all this is experiencing and in which all elements of that we see, there's elements of consciousness. So when you look at your pet again, your pet looks back at you, and there's consciousness there looking back at you. And that as you look at me on the screen and you hear my voice and you're aware of whatever's in your room, you and I are like that empty space of the room, which cannot be affected in any way. It's not capable of being disturbed, which in that emptiness is a vast intelligence, as we've talked about with DNA. So that which is growing the grass, that which is bringing out the leaves on the trees, that which is burgeoning here in spring, that is what you and I are at the deepest level. And so as I recount some of the spiritual experiences I've had for the last 25 years, beginning with the one 25 years ago, I'll give you a feeling for what you can begin to look to and see in your own life. But in the meantime, experiment with either going through the day, replacing the usual self-chatter, self-talk with I love you, silently in the background, or I love you and thank you, looking out at nature, just going through your day, or doing the four statements. I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and thank you. And that the I'm sorry and please forgive me is just saying to this greater intelligence, I'm sorry for getting in my own way, and opening a channel for this to happen. This is what they're talking about. So you can certainly explore this by looking at, again, any of the presentations that Joe Vitale and Dr. Hew Len have done. Again, I'm not going to reproduce what they have to say and do, but I'm just presenting it as it works in with our time together in these presentations. So I want you to have a great week and get into the flow. And remember, that basketball game I described, there's experiences as athletes where you're in the flow. You're not going with the chatterbox mind, that sports commentator. You're more in touch with that deeper, vaster intelligence that's orchestrating every movement in your body. So, have a great week. Again, happy spring.